She changed the locks. Didn't tell me. Just did it. I stood there with my key in my hand like a man who forgot which house was his. "This is my house now," she said. Not yelling. Not crying. Just flat. And for a second, I almost believed her. Folks, Uncle Mickle here. I didn't expect to ever say this out loud. You think you know your own front door. The weight of it. The way it sticks a little in the summer. The sound it makes when it shuts. I've opened that door 1,000 times. After long shifts. After arguments. After bringing groceries in with both arms full. But that afternoon, it wasn't my door anymore. Or at least, that's what she wanted me to feel. Jennifer didn't scream when she saw me standing there. She didn't panic. She looked calm. Too calm. Like she'd rehearsed it. "I told you we needed space," she said. Space. We were separated. That's true. Living apart for a few weeks while we figured things out. That's what she called it. But separated doesn't mean erased. Separated doesn't mean I stop existing in the home I paid for. The home my name is on. The home I built the deck for with my own hands. Still, I didn't argue. That's the part people don't understand when I tell this story. They expect I pounded on the door. That I yelled. That I demanded entry. I didn't. I just looked at her. Looked at the new deadbolt. Looked at the Ring camera she'd installed above the frame. She'd upgraded security on a house that wasn't fully hers. And I remember thinking, not angry, not even hurt yet, just confused. When did she start planning this? Because you don't wake up one morning and decide to swap out locks unless something's been brewing. She crossed her arms. That was always her tell. Whenever she thought she had leverage. "This is my house now," she repeated. "Not our house. Not until we figure this out. Mine." I nodded. I actually nodded. You ever have one of those moments where you realize if you react emotionally you lose? Even if you're right? So I swallowed it. Told her, okay. Just like that. Okay. I walked back to my truck and sat there longer than I should have. Hands on the steering wheel. Engine off. Trying to piece together what I'd missed. Marriage doesn't collapse in one argument. It erodes. Slow. Quiet. You miss the cracks because you're busy fixing the roof. I remember thinking maybe she just needed control. Maybe this was her way of feeling secure. I told myself that. I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe too much. 1 week passed. 7 quiet days. I didn't call. She didn't either. And then the knock came. Not on my door. On hers. A property appraiser. Clipboard in hand. Neutral expression. He looked at Jennifer standing there in the doorway. Then he glanced around. And he asked a simple question. "Where's the landlord?" Folks, I wasn't there when he said it, but I heard about it. And when I did, something shifted inside me. Because sometimes the truth doesn't come from shouting. It comes from a stranger asking the wrong person the right question. And that question, it changed everything. I didn't feel rage. Not yet. What I felt was clarity. The kind that makes your chest go cold instead of hot. You ever have your position in someone's life rewritten without your consent? That's what it felt like. And if I'm honest, I think she thought I'd stay quiet. I had been quiet. Too quiet. But that appraiser? He wasn't part of her plan. And neither was what came next. I'll tell you how we got there. Because none of this started with a lock. It started long before that. And looking back, I should have seen it. Before all this, before locks and appraisers and quiet humiliation, life didn't look broken. Not from the outside. Jennifer and I had been married 12 years. Not flashy years. Not Instagram kind of years. Just steady ones. Mortgage payments. Weekend grocery runs. Arguments about paint colors that lasted longer than they should have. We met at a friend's cookout. She laughed at something I said that wasn't even that funny. I liked that about her. She made things feel lighter than they were. Back then, I was working construction management. Long hours. Steel-toe boots. Hands that never really got clean no matter how hard I scrubbed. She was in medical billing. Organized. Precise. Good with numbers. We fit. At least, I thought we did. The house came 5 years into the marriage. 2-story place on a quiet street. Maple tree out front. Slight slope in the driveway that annoyed me every winter. It wasn't luxury, but it was ours. Well, legally speaking, it was mine first. I bought it before we got married. My credit. My down payment. My name on the deed. When we tied the knot, I never changed that. Not because I was guarding it. Just paperwork didn't feel urgent when everything felt solid. Maybe that was naive. Jennifer loved that house. I remember the first night after closing. She walked through every empty room like she was memorizing it. This feels permanent, she said. I told her that was the point. And for years, it was permanent. We built routines. Friday night takeout from that little Italian place down on Grove Street. Sunday mornings with coffee on the back deck I built the summer after we moved in. She picked the patio furniture. I pretended I didn't care about the color. Small things. But small things make up a life. We didn't have kids. That was complicated. A couple of years trying. A couple of quiet disappointments. We stopped talking about it eventually. Just folded that grief into the walls and kept moving. I think that's when something shifted. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a subtle distance. She started working later some nights. Said the office was short-staffed. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? I wasn't the suspicious type. I'm still not. But looking back, I can admit I got comfortable. Maybe too comfortable. I assumed love meant stability. That if there wasn't yelling, there wasn't danger. That's not always true. The first real crack showed up in a conversation about money. Not even a fight. Just tension. She asked about refinancing the house. Said rates were good. Suggested we put both our names on everything to simplify things. That's how she phrased it. Simplify. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, looking at her across from me. Why now? I asked. She shrugged. Said it made sense legally. Said married couples should share assets evenly. And she wasn't wrong. But something in her tone felt rehearsed. I told her we could talk to a lawyer first, just to understand implications. That's when she went quiet. Not angry. Just closed off. I should have pushed then. Asked more questions. Dug deeper. Instead, I let it settle. Because I didn't want conflict. That's the truth. A few weeks after that, she brought up needing space. Said we'd been drifting. Said she didn't feel connected anymore. I won't pretend I handled that perfectly. I probably shut down more than I spoke. When someone says they feel disconnected, and you thought everything was fine, it scrambles you. I suggested counseling. She said maybe. Then she packed a bag. Not all her things. Just enough to make it clear she was serious. She stayed with her friend Lisa for a while. At least, that's what she told me. We agreed it was temporary. A separation. Time to think. We didn't file anything. No paperwork. No lawyers yet. Just distance. And I kept paying the mortgage. Utilities. Insurance. All of it. Because that's what I've always done. Handle responsibilities first. Feelings later. We still texted occasionally. Polite. Measured. Like co-workers trying not to make a scene. She asked once if I consider selling the house if we divorced. That word hit heavier than I expected. Divorced. I told her I hadn't thought that far. Truth is, I hadn't. I still believed we were in a rough patch. Maybe I was behind the curve. Maybe she was already 3 steps ahead. Then one day she said she wanted to move back in. Temporarily. To figure things out under the same roof. I hesitated. Just a little. But I agreed. Because despite everything, I still saw my wife when I looked at her. Not an opponent. Not someone calculating moves. And when she walked back through that front door with her suitcase, I told myself this was healing. I told myself this was us trying. I'm curious, would you have let her come back without paperwork? Without clear boundaries? At the time, it felt like the right thing to do. Now I see it differently. Because a week after she moved back in, the locks changed. And I was standing outside my own house. The day she moved back in, she hugged me. That part still messes with my head. Not a distant hug. Not polite. It was familiar. Warm. Like muscle memory. I don't want this to fall apart, she said into my shoulder. I believed her. I wanted to. The first couple of days were normal. Too normal, maybe. She cooked dinner once. We watched a show on the couch without talking much. No deep conversations. No confrontation. Just quiet coexistence. It felt fragile. Like stepping onto ice you're not sure will hold. I figured we were easing back into it. Then small things started shifting. She moved some of my tools out of the garage to reorganize. I didn't think much of it. She'd always liked things tidy. But when I asked where my ladder went, she said she put it in storage. Storage. We didn't have a storage unit. I let it go. 2 days later, I came home from work and the Wi-Fi password didn't work. That annoyed me more than it should have. I asked her about it. Oh, I upgraded the plan, she said. Had to reset everything. No argument. She gave me the new password. Still, it was another small shift. You ever feel like you're slowly being edited out of your own life? Not in one big move. Just line by line. That's what it felt like. She started taking phone calls in the bedroom with the door closed. When I walked in unexpectedly once, she jumped, laughed it off. Work stuff, she said. Maybe it was. But her voice had that tight edge. I asked if we could sit down and talk, really talk, about where this was going. She agreed. We sat at the kitchen table. Same spot where we talked about refinancing. She folded her hands. I need security, she said. I asked what that meant. She took a breath. If we're going to keep trying, I need to know I won't be left with nothing if this fails. Nothing. I reminded her she had her own savings, her job, her retirement account. That's not the point, she said. I've invested 12 years here. That word, invested, it sounded less like love and more like equity. I stayed calm. I've always been calm in conflict. Maybe too calm. I told her if we were talking about divorce, we handle it legally and fairly. But I wasn't signing over the house preemptively. Her jaw tightened. So you don't trust me? That's how she framed it. I didn't answer right away, because I didn't want to say yes. But I also didn't want to lie. I trust us, I said carefully. But I'm not making financial decisions based on fear. She pushed back her chair slightly. Not dramatic, just enough to create distance. That conversation ended without resolution. After that, the air in the house changed. She stopped pretending things were normal. Minimal conversation. No shared dinners. She'd eat earlier or later than me. Slept on her side of the bed, turned away. 3 nights later, I had to leave town for a 2-day work inspection. Routine trip. I told her in advance. She nodded. Didn't ask details. When I left that morning, she was in the kitchen, scrolling on her phone. I remember pausing at the door. Jen, I said, we're not enemies. She didn't look up. Then don't treat me like one. I drove off with that sitting heavy in my chest. The trip was uneventful. Just long hours and hotel coffee that tasted like regret. When I got back, it was early evening. My key didn't turn. At first, I thought maybe the lock was jammed. Tried again. Nothing. I checked the address like an idiot, just to make sure I wasn't at the wrong house. That's when she opened the door from inside. Calm, arms crossed. There are some boundaries we need, she said. I looked at the new deadbolt. You changed the locks. Yes. No apology. No hesitation. This is my house now, she said. I asked her what she meant. She said since I refused to provide security, she needed to create her own. She told me she'd spoken to someone, didn't say who, about marital rights. Said that as a spouse living in the home, she had claim to residence. She spoke carefully, like she'd practiced. I didn't raise my voice. I asked one question. Did you plan this while I was gone? She didn't answer directly. I needed space from your control. Control. I've replayed that word in my head more times than I can count. I stood there for a long moment. Neighbors' windows half open. A dog barking down the street. Everything normal except my reality. I told her I wasn't fighting on the porch. She said I could stay somewhere else until we sorted out. Sorted out. I drove away that night with a gym bag and a kind of silence in my chest I'd never felt before. I stayed at a small extended stay hotel near the highway. 2 nights passed, then 3. She didn't reach out. On the 4th day, I got a notification from the bank app. A large inquiry against the property value. Not a withdrawal, just an inquiry. That was the first time suspicion hardened into something solid. I called the bank. They said someone had requested information regarding appraisal estimates. My name was still the only one on record. I asked who made the request. They couldn't disclose details without formal authorization. That's when I knew this wasn't just emotional. It was strategic. And a week after the locks changed, the property appraiser showed up at the house, unannounced to me, expected by her, and he asked her where the landlord was. When I heard that part from a neighbor later, something clicked, because that question meant she told someone she owned it, or that I was out of the picture. And I wasn't. Not legally. Not financially. Not yet. I sat in that hotel room, staring at the patterned carpet, realizing I had a choice. Stay passive, or step in. But stepping in meant escalation, and I don't escalate lightly. That night, I made one phone call. To a lawyer. The lawyer's name was David Harper. Mid-50s. Calm voice. Didn't interrupt. I told him everything. Or at least I thought I did. When I finished, there was a short silence on the line. Then he asked one question. Is your wife's name on the deed? No. Mortgage? No. He cleared his throat. Then legally, she cannot remove you from your own property. That sentence should have felt comforting. It didn't, because legality and reality aren't always the same thing. He explained something I hadn't fully considered. In our state, a spouse has marital rights to residence during separation. She couldn't claim ownership without court action, but she could create complications, especially if she was attempting to establish exclusive occupancy. Has she attempted to refinance? He asked. There was an inquiry. That means she's testing the waters. Testing the waters. I felt like I was being measured for something I didn't agree to. David advised me not to confront her emotionally, not to show up and demand entry without documentation. He said we'd handle it through notice first. Paperwork. Certified letter. It felt cold, but cold was safer than angry. The next morning, I drove by the house. Not to go in, just to look. Her car was in the driveway. A different car was parked behind it. Sedan. Silver. Not one I recognized. I sat at the end of the block longer than I should have. Could have been a friend. Could have been nothing. But it sat there like a question mark. I didn't knock. I didn't call. Instead, I spoke to the neighbor across the street later that afternoon. Tom. Retired guy. Always outside with his dog. I kept it casual. Everything quiet while I've been away. He hesitated. That hesitation said more than words. Well, there was some guy here last week. Tom said. Looked official. Clipboard and all. Appraiser. What happened? I asked. Tom scratched his chin. Your wife was showing him around. He asked her where the landlord was. I thought that was strange. She said something like, I handle the property. I felt something drop in my stomach. Handle the property. Tom continued. He didn't stay long after that. I nodded like it was no big deal. But inside, pieces were moving. David called me that evening. He'd done a quick title check. Still solely in my name. No filings yet. But then he said something that tightened everything. She's consulted a mortgage broker. How do you know? Preliminary inquiry left a record. So it wasn't imagination. It was motion. Every conversation we'd had about security, about refinancing, about shared ownership. It wasn't emotional reassurance she wanted. It was leverage. That realization didn't make me angry. It made me tired. 12 years. And we were here. David recommended we file for formal separation immediately to protect assets. I asked him if that meant divorce. He said it meant clarity. Clarity. I hadn't realized how foggy everything had become until that word. That night, I went back to the house. Not to argue. Not to shout. Just to stand on the porch again. She opened the door before I knocked. Like she'd been watching. What are you doing here? She asked. I kept my voice level. We need to talk. She didn't invite me in. We stood there. Same porch. Same new lock between us. I know about the appraisal, I said. Her expression shifted. Just slightly. I'm protecting myself, she replied. By trying to claim my house? Our house, she corrected. The first time she'd said our in weeks. I asked her directly if she was attempting to refinance without me. She didn't answer yes. She didn't answer no. Instead, she said, You forced my hand. That sentence echoed. Forced. As if I'd done something aggressive. All I'd done was hesitate to sign. I told her I'd hired a lawyer. That landed. She straightened. So this is war now. No, I said. This is boundaries. She laughed. Short. Sharp. You think paperwork makes you powerful. I almost responded defensively. But I didn't. Because power wasn't what I felt. What I felt was exposed. Like someone had been rearranging the furniture in my life while I was out of town. And I hadn't noticed. She closed the door before I could say more. Not slammed. Just closed. That night, David filed the notice. Formal separation. Protection of property. The next morning, Jennifer called me for the first time, since the locks changed. Her voice was different. Not angry. Calculated. You blindsided me, she said. I almost laughed at that. But I didn't. I'm responding, I told her. Silence stretched between us. Then she said something I didn't expect. I thought you'd just walk away. That hit harder than anything else so far. Walk away. From 12 years. From the house. From everything. She had bet on my passivity. And for a moment, I realized she might have been right. If not for that appraiser. If not for that one question. Where's the landlord? I might have kept sleeping in that hotel. Letting her establish control. Letting paperwork move quietly. That's the lowest point, I think. Not the luck. Not the argument. But realizing someone counted on you not fighting back. And maybe they were almost right. I sat alone that night with a truth I didn't want. This wasn't about saving a marriage anymore. This was about protecting myself. And I hate that it came to that. Something changes in a man when he stops arguing with reality. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's quiet. Cold almost. That's where I was. The morning after Jennifer said she thought I'd walk away. I didn't feel angry. I felt clear. Up until then, I was still trying to preserve something. Some version of us. Even while she was shifting pieces behind the scenes. But clarity has a way of stripping the sentiment out of things. I woke up in that extended stay room, stared at the beige ceiling, and realized this wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about structure. So I got structured. First thing, I met David in person. Sat across from him in his office while he laid out the roadmap. We documented everything. Timeline of separation, lock change, bank inquiry, appraisal attempt, phone records. Not to attack her, to protect myself. 40% of this phase was paperwork. Just that. No drama. No raised voices. Certified mail. Formal notices. Requests for financial disclosure. It sounds boring, but boring is powerful when someone expects chaos. David filed a motion establishing my exclusive ownership, pending court review. Not to remove her immediately. Judges don't like sudden displacement, but to freeze any refinancing or asset transfer attempts. We also requested a court-ordered mediation. That part was strategic. If she was trying to create leverage, mediation forced transparency. Every move had to be documented now. No more quiet maneuvers. No more surprise appraisers. While that machinery started moving, I did something else. I went back to the house. Not to enter. To observe. I parked down the block again. Different times of day. No more unfamiliar cars. No obvious activity. Just her going in and out. She looked tense. Even from a distance. I wondered if she was scared. Or just recalculating. Here's the part I'm not proud of. I kept replaying our history in my head like it was evidence in a case. Every conversation about security. Every time she asked about putting her name on the deed. Every subtle push. Was it love deteriorating? Or planning unfolding? I don't know. And I still don't know. That uncertainty bothers me more than anger would. Because anger is clean. Doubt lingers. About a week into legal proceedings, she requested a meeting. Not through lawyers. Directly. Neutral location. Coffee shop halfway between the house and my hotel. I almost declined. David advised against private conversations. But something in me needed to see her face without a door between us. So I went. She looked tired. Not defeated. Just worn down. We sat across from each other, with paper cups between us, like strangers negotiating a lease. I didn't think you'd escalate like this, she said quietly. I took a breath before answering. I didn't think you'd change the locks. Fair. She nodded. There was a long pause. Then she said something that shifted the entire temperature of the room. I was scared. That caught me off guard. Of what? I asked. Of ending up with nothing. Of starting over at 42 with half a life. Her voice cracked slightly. That was the first real emotion I'd seen from her since this began. For a second, just a second, I almost softened completely. Because fear I understand. But fear doesn't excuse strategy. I would have handled things fairly, I said. You say that now. There it was. Trust had evaporated on both sides. I realized then this wasn't about greed. Not entirely. It was about control and uncertainty. She didn't trust that I'd provide stability if things collapsed. And I didn't trust that she wouldn't take advantage if I stayed passive. Two people bracing instead of reaching. That's a sad place to land after 12 years. We talked for nearly an hour. No shouting. No tears. Just measured words. She admitted she'd consulted a mortgage broker to understand her options. She claimed she never intended to refinance, without my signature. Maybe that's true. Maybe the appraiser was exploratory. But the lock wasn't exploratory. That was a statement. Before we left, she said something I'll never forget. I needed to know you'd fight for something. That sentence stuck. Was this all a test? Or was that just how she framed it once the strategy failed? I don't know. And that uncertainty still sits with me. After that meeting, something inside me settled. Not reconciliation. Not resentment. Resolve. 30% reflection. 30% controlled resolve. I told David I wasn't seeking to remove her immediately. We'd proceed through mediation. We'd divide assets fairly if divorce was the outcome. But the house would not be leveraged. Not emotionally. Not legally. Not strategically. I wasn't fighting her. I was drawing a line around myself. And once that line was drawn, I didn't waver. The next court notice went out. Mediation date set. Financial disclosures required. No more shadow moves. The temperature between us cooled. Not icy. Just businesslike. Which is strange when you're still legally married to someone. But that's where we were. And I'll tell you this. When you move from emotional reaction to steady action, people who relied on your silence get uncomfortable. She wasn't shouting anymore. She wasn't declaring ownership. She was waiting. And so was I. Mediation day came quicker than I expected. No dramatic courtroom. Just a neutral office with beige walls and a long wooden table that had probably seen 100 marriages dissolve quietly. Jennifer arrived 5 minutes after me. Didn't look at me at first. Her attorney sat beside her. Younger guy. Sharp suit. Tighter jaw than necessary. David sat next to me. Calm as ever. The mediator laid out the rules. One person speaks at a time. No interruptions. Everything documented. Simple. On paper. Jennifer's attorney started. He framed it clean. 12-year marriage. Shared life. Emotional and financial contribution. Request for equitable division of marital assets, including residential interest. That phrase, residential interest. I kept my face neutral. David responded without raising his voice. Property purchased prior to marriage. Sole title. Sole mortgage responsibility. Financial records to support. No emotion. Just fact. Jennifer finally spoke. I'm not trying to steal anything, she said. Her voice wasn't defensive. It was tired. I just don't want to walk away like I never mattered. That sentence hung in the room. And for a split second, I questioned myself. Was I being too rigid? Was protecting myself turning into punishing her? The mediator asked a direct question. Mrs. Harper, did you attempt to have the property appraised for refinancing? Silence. Then, yes. No spin. Just yes. For what purpose? To understand my options if he tried to force me out. I leaned back in my chair. Force her out? I hadn't done that. I hadn't threatened that. But fear rewrites narratives. David slid a document across the table. Bank inquiry record. Date stamp while I was out of town. The mediator reviewed it, then looked at her. Did you change the locks without mutual agreement? She hesitated. Yes. No excuses. No speech. Just yes. Something shifted right there. Not in volume. In weight. The facts were simple. The actions were clear. The room felt smaller. Her attorney leaned in, whispering something to her. Probably recalculating. And here's where it sped up. Offers went back and forth. Retirement account division. Savings. Furniture. Small things. Fast. Measured. Then the house. Her side proposed a buyout. Market value split of appreciation during marriage. David countered with documented contributions. Mortgage payments. Maintenance. Improvements funded solely by me. Numbers moved. Quick. Back and forth. I barely spoke. just answered when asked. And somewhere in that exchange, I realized something uncomfortable. If she had just asked for fairness instead of control, I probably would have given more. That thought bothered me. Was I being reactive now? Was this ego? I asked for a short break. Stepped outside. Cold air hit my face. I stared at my phone screen without reading anything. 12 years. Reduced to spreadsheets. I asked myself a question I didn't expect. Am I protecting myself? Or am I trying to win? That's not the same thing. And that distinction matters. Because once this is done, you still have to live with yourself. I went back in. Sat down. Spoke for the first time voluntarily. I'm not removing her tomorrow, I said. She can stay 30 days post-agreement to transition. Her eyes lifted slightly. I'm willing to split appreciation accrued during marriage, I continued, but not the base equity prior. David nodded subtly. Fair. Not punitive. Not weak. The room recalibrated. Negotiation tightened. Final numbers drafted. She would receive a structured settlement from savings and partial appreciation value. In exchange, she would formally relinquish any residential claim. No refinance. No future dispute. Clean. The mediator asked if both parties agreed. Jennifer looked at the paper for a long time. Then she signed. Just like that. No tears. No dramatic exit. Just a signature. I signed next. It felt heavier than I expected. Not triumphant. Not devastating. Just final. As we stood to leave, she finally looked at me directly. I didn't think you'd fight this hard, she said. There was no anger in it. Just recognition. I answered honestly. I didn't think you'd push me to. We held eye contact for a second longer than comfortable. Then it broke. And that was it. No gavel. No shouting. Just paperwork. Fast. Clean. Decisive. But here's the truth. Even when you win legally, there's no applause. There's just quiet. And in that quiet, you start asking yourself harder questions. Should I have seen it earlier? Should I have communicated better? Did my calm come off as indifference? There's no judge for that part. Just you. Driving home alone. She moved out 28 days later. Not 30. 28. I noticed that. I don't know why. Maybe because it told me she was ready to be done before the calendar required it. I wasn't there when she packed the last of her things. David advised against overlap. Clean separation. Less chance of friction. When I finally walked back into the house alone, it felt different. Not empty. Just rearranged. Some furniture gone. Pictures off the walls. The faint outline of frames still visible if the light hit right. It's strange how absence is shape. I stood in the living room for a while, without moving, listening to the quiet. No TV hum. No cabinet doors closing. No second set of footsteps upstairs. Just me. I expected relief. What I felt instead was something softer. Not sadness exactly. More like recognition. This chapter was over. Not because I slammed it shut. Not because she did. But because we'd both pulled too hard in opposite directions. The house was still legally mine. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like responsibility returned. I walked through each room slowly. The bedroom felt smaller. The kitchen felt louder somehow, without her there. Funny how that works. I found one of her coffee mugs in the cabinet. The blue one with the chipped handle she refused to throw away. I held it for a second. Then I put it back. Not everything needs a symbolic ending. The divorce finalized 3 months later. No drama. No surprise motions. Just signatures and processing time. Friends asked how I felt about winning the house. I always corrected them. I didn't win anything. I protected something. There's a difference. Financially, the settlement was fair. She walked away with enough to start over comfortably. I didn't try to squeeze. Didn't try to punish. And she didn't try any more surprise maneuvers. We spoke once after everything was done. Not about property. Not about money. Just logistics. At the end of the call, she said, I never meant for it to get that ugly. I thought about that for a long time after we hung up. Because from my side, it wasn't ugly. It was quiet, calculated, controlled. But maybe that's uglier in a different way. Here's what I've had to sit with. She was scared. I was complacent. She reacted with control. I reacted with structure. Two coping mechanisms colliding. And somewhere in that collision, The marriage just cracked. I don't hate her. That surprises some people. I don't. I think she panicked. I think she equated security with ownership. And when she felt uncertain, she grabbed for leverage. Would I have given her more if she'd asked differently? Maybe. Would she have trusted that? I don't know. That's the part no mediator can settle. A few months after the divorce, I refinanced the house on my own terms. Lower rate. Clean paperwork. No pressure. I replaced the front door. Not because I had to. Because I wanted to. New lock. New frame. Same address. There's something grounding about choosing change instead of reacting to it. Some nights, I still sit on the back deck I built years ago, coffee in hand, listening to the neighborhood settle down, and I think about how close I came to just letting it go. Not fighting, not questioning, just assuming peace was better than confrontation. If that appraiser hadn't asked that question, "Where's the landlord?" I might have stayed passive long enough to lose leverage completely. It's strange how turning points sometimes come from strangers. But here's something else I've learned. The lock wasn't the betrayal. The silence before it was. The assumptions. The unspoken fears. We both let too much go unsaid. And when it finally surfaced, it came out sideways. Life now. It's quieter. Not lonely. Just steady. I cook more. I read at night instead of scrolling. I talk to neighbors I used to wave at from a distance. You don't rebuild overnight. You just keep showing up in small ways. And over time, the house feels like home again. Different home. But home. There's no dramatic ending here. No revenge. No redemption arc. Just boundaries drawn. Consequences faced. And two people who probably could have handled things better. But didn't. And that's real life. I've replayed that sentence more times than I can count. This is my house now. At the time, it felt like a challenge. Like a line drawn in the sand. But looking back, it was more than that. It was fear speaking through control. And I didn't see it clearly because I was too busy trying to keep everything calm. That's something I've had to own. I thought being steady was enough. I thought paying the bills, fixing the deck, keeping my voice level, that was proof of commitment. But emotional security isn't built on spreadsheets. It's built on conversations you don't avoid. We avoided too many. When she first brought up refinancing, I treated it like paperwork. When she said she needed security, I heard accusation instead of anxiety. And when I felt the distance growing, I told myself it would pass. That's on me. Now don't misunderstand me. Changing the locks was wrong. Trying to maneuver behind my back was wrong. Fear explains behavior. It doesn't excuse it. But if there's any wisdom in this mess, it's this. Silence creates stories. And if you don't fill in the blanks with truth, someone else fills them with fear. She assumed I'd leave her with nothing. I assumed she trusted me. Neither of us verified those assumptions. We just acted on them. I've been asked if I regret fighting back. No. I regret that it ever reached a point where fighting was necessary. There's a difference. Boundaries are not cruelty. But boundaries without communication feel like walls. And walls invite strategy instead of vulnerability. If you're listening to this and you're in that quiet stage, the one where nothing explosive has happened yet, but something feels off, don't ignore it. Don't assume calm means safe. Ask the uncomfortable question. Have the awkward conversation. Because once lawyers enter the room, you're no longer repairing. You're dividing. And division is efficient, but it's not healing. I don't sit here as a victim, and I don't sit here as a villain either. Just a man who learned that passivity isn't peace. It's postponement, and postponement gets expensive. Emotionally, financially, personally. I replaced the front door, yeah, but what really changed was me. I speak sooner now. I clarify sooner. I don't assume silence equals agreement, and I don't confuse stability with connection. If someone tells you they're scared, don't dismiss it. If someone changes the locks, don't ignore it. Both mean something. Here's something I still think about. If that appraiser had never shown up, if he hadn't asked that one simple question, would I have kept sleeping in that hotel room, hoping time would smooth it over? Maybe. That's the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes it takes an outsider to reveal what's already happening inside your own home. So let me ask you something. If the locks in your life change tomorrow, metaphorically or literally, would you recognize it early enough to respond wisely? Or would you wait until someone else points it out? That's not a judgment. That's reflection. Because we all miss things when we're trying to keep the peace. And peace without clarity is fragile. So that's my story, folks. If it resonated with you, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far Uncle Mickle's voice travels. Protect your peace, but never at the cost of your voice.